The sun scorched the rust-colored earth beneath Marcus's boots as he hoisted another crate of expired canned goods into the back of his battered pickup. The heat clung to his skin like a second, suffocating layer, but he moved with methodical endurance, the same rhythm he applied to every part of his life since his wife passed. There was no room for complaint, not when mouths needed feeding, and the world didn't wait for grief to fade. At 39, Marcus wore hardship like a second skin. His once jet-black hair had surrendered to premature streaks of gray, and the lines around his eyes hinted at years of sleepless nights and silent resilience. He lived in a sun-bleached trailer on the edge of a forgotten desert town, working odd jobs for meager pay, and raising his 7-year-old son, Eli, with every ounce of strength he could summon. It wasn't the life he envisioned, but it was the one he had, and Marcus had made peace with the slow unraveling of dreams. He didn't talk much, didn't expect much, just one day at a time. That particular afternoon was hotter than usual. The desert winds were dry and restless, gusting in fitful waves that stung the eyes and carried sand like tiny blades. Marcus was on his usual route back from the food bank, planning a dinner of rice and green beans, when a movement caught his eye on the side of the highway, barely perceptible, easy to miss. He slowed, squinting through the grimy windshield. At first, he thought it might be a coyote or some desert scavenger, but then he saw the outline of an arm, thin and shaking, raised weakly toward the sky. He pulled over. The girl lay slumped against a rock, her clothes dusty and clinging to her sweat-soaked skin. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her lips were cracked, skin reddened to the point of blistering, and her breathing shallow. Marcus knelt beside her, cautious but urgent. "Hey," he said, his voice hoarse in the dry air. "You alive?" Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out, something like, "Please." He scanned her from head to toe and froze. Her shirt was pulled tight over a clearly rounded belly. She was pregnant. Marcus stood abruptly, running a hand through his sweat-matted hair. A girl, alone, in the desert, and pregnant. He didn't want this, didn't need this. But the sun beat down relentlessly, and her body trembled under its glare. He glanced back toward his truck, then down at her again. "All right," he muttered under his breath. "Okay." He moved fast, lifting her gently and half-carrying, half-dragging her into the cab. She was light, too light for someone expecting a baby. Her breath hitched as he settled her into the seat, and she winced, gripping her side. "Don't die on me," he muttered, throwing the truck into gear. He took her to the town's understaffed clinic, a squat, beige building that always smelled faintly of antiseptic and sweat. The nurse on duty took one look and hurried them in. Marcus waited outside the room, pacing the floor. He hadn't even asked her name. The nurse emerged half an hour later. She's severely dehydrated, but stable. You brought her in time. He exhaled. And the baby? Too early to tell. We'll monitor her overnight. Marcus nodded, staring through the frosted glass. She say anything? She said your name was Marcus. He frowned. I never told her my name. She must have heard someone say it. Or maybe she guessed. Or maybe it didn't matter. When the girl woke again, it was dark outside, and Marcus was still there, sitting rigidly in a plastic chair by the window. She turned her head slowly, wincing as she moved. You stayed, she croaked. He nodded. Didn't know where else you had to go. Her eyes welled up, not with gratitude, but with exhaustion. What's your name? He asked. Kayla. He waited. She didn't offer more. Where are your folks? She shook her head. No one. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, but thick with things unsaid. He nodded again, slow and deliberate. You can stay a couple days. Not much, but it's something. Her lips parted like she might protest, but she didn't. She simply closed her eyes, and Marcus sat back in his chair, unsure what he'd just invited into his life. Back at the trailer, Eli peeked through the window. As the truck pulled up, Marcus had called earlier to say he'd be late, and now the boy was full of questions. Who's that? He asked, watching as Marcus helped Kayla from the cab. She's someone who needs help. Like us? Marcus paused. Yeah, like us. They set Kayla up in the back room, the one filled with boxes and old furniture. Eli dragged in a pillow and offered her his favorite blanket. She accepted it without a word, clutching it to her chest. That night, Marcus lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked in slow, uneven circles. He couldn't shake the image of her lying out there in the sun, abandoned. She'd been left for dead, and he had no idea why. He didn't need another person to care for. He was barely keeping his own life stitched together. But something about her vulnerability struck a nerve he thought had long gone numb. In the morning, the desert air was cool and still. Marcus made eggs and toast, basic but warm, and set a plate outside Kayla's door. She came out 10 minutes later, tentative and stiff. "Thanks," she mumbled, sitting across from him at the table. Eli chattered beside them, showing her a plastic dinosaur missing its tail. She managed a faint smile. "Can you stay here forever?" Eli asked. Marcus gave him a sharp look. "That's not how it works, bud." But Kayla surprised him. "No," she said softly. Just a little while later, as Marcus fixed a leaky faucet, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her belly. "You don't even know me," she said. "Nope." "You don't ask a lot of questions." "Nope." She waited. He kept working. Finally, she said, "I was running from something bad." He turned off the wrench and looked at her. "Aren't we all?" The days stretched on. She slept, ate, and slowly began to open up. Not all at once, never too much. Just a name here, a detail there. He learned she'd been living with an older boyfriend who turned violent when he found out she was pregnant. She escaped in the night, stole his keys, and drove until the gas ran out somewhere in the dunes. She hadn't meant to survive. She just hadn't known what else to do. Marcus didn't judge. He couldn't afford to. Life had taught him that people didn't always make good choices, but they were still people. One afternoon, while they watched Eli chase lizards in the dust, Kayla turned to Marcus and said, "You didn't have to stop." He didn't look at her. Didn't feel right to keep driving. A quiet moment passed. Then she said, "Most people wouldn't have. I'm not most people." She smiled, a real one this time. That night, as the desert stars blinked awake in the ink-black sky, Marcus sat outside with a beer in hand, watching the shadows of his trailer stretch across the sand. Kayla was inside, reading to Eli. Her voice was low, melodic, barely above a whisper. He didn't know how long she'd stay. Didn't know what the future held. But for now, for this one sliver time, they weren't strangers anymore. They were survivors. And somehow, that felt like enough. The days settled into a cautious rhythm. Kayla would rise slowly, her hand always resting protectively on her growing belly, and shuffle into the kitchen where Marcus had usually already brewed coffee and cooked something simple: oatmeal, toast, eggs if they were lucky. She never asked for anything, always offered to help despite the evident fatigue etched into her movements. Marcus noticed the way she flinched at sudden noises, or when someone stood too close. He didn't press. He knew trauma when he saw it. It had a language of its own when he was fluent in. He gave her space, but also structure, not as a savior, but because he'd been surviving long enough to know that people needed anchors, even if they didn't admit it. Eli, ever the bright spark in Marcus's weary life, took to Kayla quickly. He wasn't old enough to understand the weight she carried, both literal and invisible, but he had the instinctive compassion of a child. He would bring her his battered storybooks and sit by her feet, asking her to read. Kayla obliged, halting at first, stumbling over her own self-doubt more than the words. But each time, her voice grew steadier. One afternoon, while Marcus was outside repairing a fence post, Kayla stepped into the dusty yard, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. "Do you want help?" He looked up from his crouch, sweat streaking the grime on his forehead. "You sure you should be lifting things?" "I'm not made of glass," she said. "I just want to do something. I hate feeling useless." He handed her a can of nails and a hammer, then held the post steady. They worked in silence, her holding the beam firm while he secured it. It wasn't a grand moment, but something shifted. Shared labor had a way of breaking down barriers faster than words. Later that evening, As they ate dinner around a rickety table, kin chili and saltine crackers, Kayla said, "I used to think I wouldn't keep the baby." Marcus didn't look up. "What changed your mind?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Maybe nothing has. But I can't stop thinking about how I felt out there. Alone. Dying. And how it felt when someone finally saw me." He nodded, tearing a cracker in half. "I get that." The bond between them grew not through grand gestures, but in the mundane, washing dishes together, folding laundry, chasing down Eli when he snuck out barefoot. She began helping with small things around the trailer, sorting through old boxes, wiping down the counters, even organizing Marcus's cluttered tool shed. He didn't stop her. He figured if she was trying to carve out space, let her. Every few days, he'd drive her to the clinic for checkups. The nurse, a gentle older woman named Marla, took a liking to Kayla. On one visit, she printed out the ultrasound photo and handed it to her with a soft smile. Kayla stared at it for a long time, fingers trembling slightly. That night, she tucked it carefully into the drawer beside her bed and didn't say a word. One evening, a dust storm rolled in fast. The sky turned a sickly orange and winds howled across the sand flats, rattling the trailer walls. Power flickered out just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Eli clung to Kayla, and Marcus lit a couple candles. "It's okay," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm. "Just the desert throwing a tantrum." They sat on the floor with a flashlight between them, Kayla tracing shapes on Eli's back to soothe him. Eventually, he dozed off against her side. Marcus watched from across the room, his features softening in the candlelight. "You're good with him," he said. She shrugged. "I don't know what I'm doing." "None of us do. We just figure out as we go." After the storm passed, they sat outside, sipping warm tap water and watching the stars emerge one by one. "You don't talk about Eli's mom," Kayla said quietly. Marcus didn't respond at first. Then she passed. It was sudden. Kayla looked down. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't ask again. That was the nature of their connection, solid but unobtrusive. Neither one needed to spill everything to be understood. They both carried the weight of broken past, and in some twisted way, that was its own kind of comfort. In town, the gossip began to hum. Small places had long memories and quick tongues. Some folks assumed Kayla was Marcus's wayward niece. Others muttered about impropriety. A few whispered things uglier than that. At the gas station, Marcus overheard a man snort, "Some people do anything for a little attention." Marcus didn't engage. He never had the time or energy for rumors. But the word stuck in his teeth like gristle. He told Kayla about it later, unsure why. She raised her chin. "Let them talk. At least they're not leaving me to die in the sun." That made him chuckle. "You're a tough kid." She narrowed her eyes. "I'm not a kid." He didn't correct her. In many ways, she wasn't. She had the look of someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast, someone who had learned the cost of vulnerability. A week later, Kayla woke in the early hours of the morning, her breath short and sharp. Pain radiated through her abdomen, and panic clawed up her throat. She stumbled from her room, calling out. Marcus was out of bed instantly. One look at her face, and he knew something was wrong. "Car," she gasped. "Hospital." Eli stood sleepily in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Marcus ushered him back to bed and bundled Kayla into the truck. The desert night was pitch black, headlights carving narrow tunnels of light through the stillness. She gripped the dashboard, her breath hitching with every bump. "I think something's wrong," she whispered. "You hold on. You hear me? We're almost there." At the clinic, they wheeled her in. Marcus paced the empty corridor, jaw tight. He hated this feeling, the helplessness, the waiting, the silent bargaining with fate. After what felt like hours, Marla came out. She had some early contractions, she said. "We've managed to slow them down. She and the baby are okay for now, but she'll need rest." "A lot of it." Marcus nodded, his shoulders sagging in relief. When Kayla was stable, she asked for Marcus. He stepped into her dim room and found her lying there, pale and quiet, eyes red from crying. "I thought I was going to lose it." she said. You didn't. I've never been so scared. He sat by her bed. You're not alone, remember? She reached out, just barely, and he took her hand. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. When she was discharged, Marcus made sure she had everything she needed. He bought vitamins, propped pillows behind her back, and scoured thrift stores for baby things. An old bassinet, tiny onesies, a faded stuffed bear. She watched him with a mixture of awe and confusion. Why are you doing all this? She asked one evening. He shrugged. Someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. Never forgot that. Kayla tilted her head. Do you think I deserve it? I think you needed it. The answer wasn't poetic, but it was honest. That was Marcus's way. One slow afternoon, as cicadas buzzed in the dry heat, Marcus found Kayla sitting on the front steps, rubbing her belly and humming. It was the first time he'd seen her genuinely content. He sat beside her, handing her a glass of water. You pick out a name yet? He asked. She nodded slowly. Thinking of Hope. Seems fitting. He smiled. Yeah, it does. That night, after Eli went to bed, Kayla lingered in the kitchen, drying dishes while Marcus wiped down the counters. You ever think, she said slowly, that maybe the worst thing that happens to us is the thing that leads to the best thing? He leaned on the sink. Yeah, I think that a lot. They stood there a moment longer, the hum of the fridge the only sound between them. In the weeks that followed, they fell into something that resembled family, even if no one dared to call it that. The roles weren't defined, but the care was real. Marcus became the steady hand that helped her through the final months of pregnancy. Kayla, in turn, brought light into a house that had long gone dim. When Eli drew a picture in crayon of the three of them holding hands, Kayla teared up. He thinks we're a family, she whispered. Marcus looked at the drawing. Maybe we are. She looked at him then, really looked at him, at the weathered man with tired eyes and a good heart who had given her a second chance without asking for anything in return. And something in her chest, once hollow and aching, began to fill. She still didn't know what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long time, she believed it might be worth finding out. Outside, the desert wind whispered against the trailer walls, no longer harsh, but like a lullaby. And inside, something fragile and beautiful had begun to bloom. Summer months stretched long and dry, each day peeling away layers of hesitation between Marcus and Kayla, revealing something deeper than either had expected. The bond they'd built, first out of necessity, then from shared resilience, had become a quiet tether, unspoken yet unbreakable. The desert, once harsh and indifferent, now seemed to hum with a softer energy around the trailer, as if the land itself acknowledged a change taking root inside its weather walls. Kayla had begun to glow, not with the glow people often describe in pregnant women, but a different kind. A steadiness had settled over her, fragile but growing stronger each day. She moved slower now, hands resting frequently on her belly, her steps measured, but her eyes, once wary and storm-clouded, now held clarity. She laughed more. She sang under her breath when washing dishes. She painted a small mural on Eli's bedroom wall. Stick figures of a boy, a bear, a girl with long brown hair, and a baby held in the crook of a sunbeam. Eli adored her. He followed her around like a shadow, eager to help her carry pillows or fold baby clothes. Sometimes he would rest his head against her belly, listening, whispering secrets to the baby only he and Kayla were allowed to know. It made Marcus's chest ache in ways he couldn't explain. For his part, Marcus worked harder than ever. He picked up extra shifts patching roofs and fixing generators. Every dollar counted, every meal carefully stretched. He didn't complain. Kayla tried to stop him once, insisting he needed rest too, but he waved her off with a half smile. I've gone without a lot in my life, he told her, but I've never let a kid go hungry. I'm not about to start now. She watched him as he spoke. This man who had taken her in without questions, who protected her with the same quiet diligence he gave his son. Something inside her cracked open further. Love wasn't a lightning bolt or a sweeping orchestral moment. It was this: consistency, presence, sacrifice. As her due date neared, fear returned in the spaces between breaths. Late at night, She would lie awake in the little room Marcus had cleared for her, listening to the faint hum of cicadas, wondering what kind of mother she would be. Would she be strong enough? Would she know what to do? Sometimes she would tiptoe to the living room and find Marcus still awake, sitting at the table with bills scattered in front of him, pen tapping against his lip. "You don't sleep much," she'd whisper. He'd glance up. "You neither." She'd sit across from him, and sometimes they'd talk about small things. What Eli said that day, whether they needed more milk, how the neighbor's dog was always getting into their trash. Other nights they'd sit in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Then came the night Kayla went into labor. It started just after midnight, a sharp pain that made her double over and grip the bed frame. She called out once, and Marcus was at her side in seconds, eyes wide but calm. He helped her into the truck, and Eli, half asleep and confused, was bundled into the back seat with a blanket and his favorite bear. The drive was long. The town's clinic was closed at night, so Marcus took her to the nearest hospital, nearly an hour away, the road winding to the dark like a ribbon of uncertainty. Kayla cried out with each contraction, and Marcus kept one hand on the wheel and the other clenched on the dashboard, as if by sheer force he could will the baby to wait. At the hospital, she was wheeled away quickly. A nurse handed Marcus a clipboard. He hesitated, staring at the question, relation to patient? He wrote one word, guardian. It was a truth in every way that mattered. Hours passed. Eli fell asleep in the waiting room, curled on two chairs pushed together. Marcus paced, wore a groove into the linoleum. At sunrise, the doctor came out. "She did well," he said. "She's resting now. And the baby's healthy. A girl." Marcus sat down, legs suddenly weak. "Can I see them?" The doctor nodded. "She asked for you." In the room, Kayla looked pale and exhausted, her hair damp with sweat. But her face was luminous. She cradled a tiny bundle, pink and squirming, wrapped tight in a hospital blanket. "She's here," Kayla whispered. "She's really here." Marcus approached slowly, heart hammering. Kayla tilted the baby so he could see her tiny face, scrunched red, perfect. "Meet Hope," she said, her voice shaking. He swallowed hard. "She's beautiful." Kayla looked at him then, tears rising. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be what she needs." He sat beside her. "Neither did I. Still don't some days. But you show up." He nodded. "That's the secret. Just keep showing up." She looked at the baby again, then back at him. "I want to stay." The words settled between them like a sunrise, soft but permanent. "You have a home here," he said. "You always have." When they returned to the trailer, it was different, not because the walls had changed or the wind had stopped scratching at the windows, but because the space inside felt fuller. Eli ran to Kayla and the baby, shouting, "She's so small." He gently patted Hope's blanket-wrapped feet and declared himself a big brother on the spot. Kayla didn't cry often. She'd taught herself how not to. But that day, as she watched Eli cradle the baby and Marcus hang a paper sign that read, "Welcome home, Hope," she let the tears fall. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, lullabies, and the sweet, sour smell of formula. Kayla and Marcus became a team, swapping shifts, taking turns feeding and changing, adjusting to the chaos of newborn life. He built a crib from scraps of wood. She stitched together curtains for Hope's window from old pillowcases. Love was in every detail. One night, weeks later, Kayla found Marcus asleep on the couch, Hope on his chest, her tiny hand curled around his shirt collar. She stood there a long moment, heart full and aching. He stirred. "She has strong lungs." "She has a strong heart," Kayla said. "Like her dad." He looked at her, blinking. "I'm not." She shook her head. "You are. Maybe not by blood. But in every other way that counts, you are." He didn't answer, just looked down at the baby, a smile playing on his lips. The next morning, while the desert wind blew gentle dust across the porch, Marcus brewed coffee and stepped outside. Kayla joined him, baby monitor clipped to her shirt. They watched the sunrise, pink light spilling over the hills. "I've been thinking," she said, "about school." Finishing my GED, maybe taking some classes online. Marcus nodded, sipping from his mug. I think that's a great idea. She looked at him, uncertain. Would you be okay with me still staying here? Well, I figure things out. He didn't hesitate. This is your home, Kayla. As long as you need it. As long as you want it. She smiled, brushing hair from her face. It's not just mine anymore. It's Hope's too. And Eli's. And yours. He looked out at the horizon. Guess it's ours, then. A new kind of silence fell over them, not of things unsaid, but of peace, of acceptance, of chosen family. Kayla didn't know what the future would hold. There would be challenges, days when money ran low, or the past tried to claw its way back in, but she wasn't afraid of that anymore. She had been left to die in the desert and found a reason to live instead. She had been rescued by a man with nothing to give but everything to offer, and she had become something more than she thought possible. A mother, a sister, a daughter, a survivor. They weren't a typical family, and that was fine. Their bond hadn't been born from convenience or obligation, but from sacrifice, patience, and something unspoken but deeply felt. Love that healed, not with words, but with action. As the sun rose higher and the heat began to build, Hope stirred in the monitor with a soft cry. Kayla stood, her movements graceful now, confident. I've got her, she said. Marcus smiled. I know you do. The years passed not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, faithful steps. Hope grew quickly, the way desert flowers do after a long drought. Sudden and miraculous. She had Kayla's fierce eyes and Marcus's quiet strength, and an energy all her own. From her first wobbly steps across the trailer floor to the time she painted the walls with Eli's markers in a burst of toddler rebellion, she brought with her a sense of joy that made even the hardest days feel survivable. Kayla never left. What was once a temporary shelter became something rooted. She earned her GED with honors, then enrolled in community college classes online, while working part-time at a local library. She studied at night after Hope had gone to bed, often with Marcus across the table balancing bills or fixing old tools. The clink of coffee mugs, the scratch of pencils, the soft murmur of Eli reading aloud in the next room, it all became a melody of ordinary grace. Marcus continued to work with his hands, fixing what was broken, patching what was torn. He didn't say much about the way things had changed, but the lines in his face seemed less burdened, his silences less heavy. He took pride in watching Kayla push forward, in watching Eli become a teenager full of curiosity and kindness, and hope light up every space she entered. They never talked about what label to give their family. They didn't need one. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every late-night conversation by the front steps only confirmed what they already knew. This was home, but time, in its relentless way, kept marching forward. One spring morning, Marcus collapsed in the garage. Kayla found him barely conscious, hand clenched around a wrench, his skin pale and lips tinged gray. She called for Eli, who was taller now, leaner, his voice newly deep, and together they got him into the truck. At the hospital, the diagnosis came swiftly: a weak heart, one that had quietly deteriorated over the years. Stress, physical labor, and likely genetics had all played their part. He needs surgery, the doctor said, his voice flat but kind. And even then, recovery will be long. Expensive. Kayla sat alone in the hospital hallway, her hands cold despite the heat outside. She was no longer the scared girl Marcus had taken in. She was a mother, a student, a woman who had built a life out of ashes. But in that moment, she felt 16 again, helpless, terrified, and furious at a world that kept asking more from people who had already given everything. Hope, now 6, visited him the next day, skipping into his hospital room with a drawing clutched in her hand. It's our family, she said, climbing onto the bed without hesitation. That's you, that's Mommy, that's Eli, and that's me. And see the sky? That's the miracle. Marcus looked at the drawing, his eyes damp. Why is the sky the miracle? Because you said once that the sky never quits. Even when you can't see it, it's there. Kayla watched him from the doorway, heart caught in her throat. She remembered that night in the desert, how the sky had stretched over her like an unanswered question, and how Marcus had become the first person to truly answer it. The medical bills stacked quickly. Insurance only covered part of the surgery. Caleb picked up extra hours. Eli, without complaint, took on more responsibilities at home, even helping Hope with homework and cooking simple meals. Kayla rarely slept. She applied for grants, launched a fundraising page, sold a few valuables she had collected over the years. Books, jewelry, the old guitar Marcus once taught Eli to play. Neighbors pitched in where they could. The community that had once whispered about them now brought casseroles and envelopes of folded bills. Still, it wasn't enough. Then, one evening, Kayla received a call from university, a school she'd applied to years ago and forgotten. Thinking she'd never go that far. "You've been awarded a full scholarship," the voice said, "including housing and childcare support. It's competitive, but your application stood out." Her heart swelled and broke all at once. She couldn't leave. Not now. Not when Marcus needed her. But the woman on the phone added one more thing. "You mentioned in your personal essay that your dream was to study medicine so you could give back to the man who saved your life. There's a hospital attached to the university. They have a partnership program. You'd be able to work and study. Help others like him." That night, Kayla sat beside Marcus's hospital bed, holding his weathered hand in hers. "I got in," she said. "Full ride. Housing. Everything." He opened his eyes, barely able to smile. "That's incredible." "But I won't go," she said, voice trembling. "I'm staying. You need me." Marcus squeezed her hand weakly. "I need you to live, Kayla. You've got wings now. You can't clip them for me." "But you already gave me everything," he said. "A second chance. Family. That little girl." She lowered her head to his chest, listening to the frail beat of the heart that had once lifted hers from the edge of death. "I want you to go," he whispered. "Go do what I couldn't." Kayla went. She packed lightly. Eli promised to watch over Marcus during her first semester, and she promised to return every break, every holiday. The goodbye was not tearful. It was determined. At the university, she excelled. Her professors called her unstoppable. Her classmates admired her drive, but few knew the full story. The girl in the desert, the broken man, the family forged by circumstance and sacrifice. Hope adapted quickly. She made friends, charmed teachers, and took every opportunity to draw her family on paper. Always with four figures, always under the sky. Letters passed between Kayla and Marcus every week. She sent photos, test results, stories of her classes. He sent back short notes, jokes for Hope, and updates about Eli, who had taken a job at the hardware store to help out. Then, one crisp October afternoon, Kayla received a call. Marcus was gone. A quiet passing in his sleep, after watching a Western movie with Eli, his favorite kind. He had gone with a smile. Eli said. He had said he was proud. The world did not end. It shifted. It folded inward for a while. Kayla returned for the funeral. The service was simple. No big speeches. Just people, neighbors, co-workers, even strangers, standing up to share what Marcus had meant to them. A man who helped without asking. A man who showed up. Kayla spoke last. "I wouldn't be here," she said, voice cracking, "if Marcus hadn't stopped that day in the desert. I wouldn't have my daughter. I wouldn't know what family meant. He didn't have much, but he gave everything, and he never asked for anything back." Hope clutched her hand, confused but brave. They scattered as ashes across the dunes beyond the trailer, where the wind caught them and lifted them into the sky he had loved. Back at the trailer, Kayla stood in the doorway. It still smelled like motor oil and coffee. Eli was inside packing boxes. He was taller now, his posture more assured. He had grown into himself. "What now?" he asked. Kayla looked around. The desert was still dry, still wide, but it didn't feel empty. "We keep going," she said. "That's what he taught us." Years passed again. Hope grew into a teenager. Eli started his own business. Kayla graduated with honors, then became a nurse practitioner. She came back often, holidays, long weekends, summers. She built a small clinic near the trailer park, offering free checkups to people who couldn't afford them. She named it Marcus House. On the wall hung a framed drawing for figures under a bright blue sky. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Hope stood beside Kayla outside the clinic. "Mom," she said, "you think he knew how much he mattered?" Kayla looked up at the endless, quiet sky. "I think he does now." And for the first time in a long while, the desert wind felt like a whisper of gratitude. A full circle. A miracle returned.